Chapter 9. Fearing the Worse. It is December 4, 1876. President Grant is inside his White House office standing by the window. Aware tensions are still high, he watches the protesters marching on the street below with concern. After almost a month, both sides are relentless in their support for their candidates. Orville Babcock is President Grant's private secretary and served as the same for him during the Civil War. He's in Grant's office reviewing a telegram response from General Sherman. Without turning away from the window, Grant, while chomping on his cigar, asks Babcock, "What reports have come in?" Babcock begins to read the telegram message out loud. From General Sherman. Disruption is being reported throughout the Union. The Republican and Democratic parties are both taking action in the streets to resolve the issues concerning which candidate will succeed you. It has also been reported that many military veterans, even though out of uniform, remain a threat. Frustrated and angered by the demonstrations, the president turns from the window and slams his hand down on the desk, startling Babcock. This country cannot afford another bloody battle. We must maintain order, and Congress must respond to their constitutional duty by the 6th when the electoral votes are submitted. As I see it, Tilden won the popular vote and is elected. Babcock places the telegram on the president's desk and walks out of the office. Meanwhile, over at the Capitol building, several senators and congressmen are discussing the situation as they stroll outside, with their aides following closely behind. As they near the entrance of the building, they try to avoid the protesters vying for their attention. Once inside, they continue to the House chambers, where they will begin hearings and debates regarding the latest news and events concerning the election dispute. Congressman John Good, a colonel in the Confederate Army during the Civil War, is currently the Democratic representative from Virginia. He enters the chamber with one of his aides. He begins tapping a folded newspaper against his left palm as he walks toward the front and center of the room to where the Speaker's desk is located. A few other congressmen, including Speaker of the House, Democrat Samuel Randall, are standing near the desk and are in mid-discussion when he arrives. They acknowledge him, then continue to talk amongst themselves. Good hands the paper off to his aide and in a hushed voice tells him, "When I signal, please read the Grant statement out loud." His aide agrees, then Good turns back to the gathered congressmen. Clearing his throat to gain the other men's attention, Good says, "Excuse me, gentlemen, I need your undivided attention for a moment so you can hear the statement made by the president." He signals with his hand for the aide to begin, and the aide straightens the paper out and begins to read aloud. It says that President Grant and the Republicans will have the regular army, but the governors of the Democratic states will have to call upon the militia if needed. The man stops and looks at the gathered congressmen. There is a moment of awkward silence. He then looks back to Good and asks, "Would you like me to read more?" "No. That will be all." As Good turns back to face his fellow congressman, Speaker Randall and the others mumble some words between themselves. After a few hushed comments, Speaker of the House Randall walks to the Speaker's podium, picks up his gavel and bangs it a few times on the desk. The other congressmen know that this is the signal for their aides and the tellers in the room to take their prospective seats. They all scatter to different areas of the chamber, sitting and standing in areas designated to them. Good turns to his aide, "It's time, go and take your seat." The man walks up the aisle and stands with some others not politically elected in the room. One of the other congressmen, standing near Good, says to him, "The fear amongst us is heightening with the threats of violence surrounding this election." Good fires back with sternness in his voice, "We are the lawmakers and we should abide by the Constitution." The other man slips his hand into his jacket and pulls back the front of his suit to show Good he has a pistol in his inside coat pocket. He says to Congressman Good, "The Constitution is not going to protect us from those violent protesters out there in the streets." With a look of disgust, Good puts his hands on his hips and puts his face inches away from the other man. Keeping his voice low and controlled, he asks, "Do you really believe that is necessary?" Without hesitation, the congressman in his own defense declares, "I'm not the only one walking the streets in fear. Several representatives are armed. I suggest you do the same to protect yourself." Before Good can respond, he is interrupted by Speaker Randall, who begins banging his gavel once again to quiet the noisy room. He shouts out, "The House will come to order." Within moments, the congressmen quiet down and take their seats. The feeling of tension in the room is running high. John Good stands to his feet and raises his voice so all can hear him, "Mr. Speaker, one party or another must surrender or we must fight." He then turns to face the assembly. "Are the gentlemen prepared for a fight?" Without pause, all the congressmen rise to their feet and shout out with a fiery cry, "Yes." The room fills with noisy chatter again and John Good is stunned by the quick and maddened response and slowly slumps back into his seat. Once more, Speaker Randall bangs his gavel several times and shouts, "Order! The House must come to order." Another congressman, standing close to Good, leans over to the seated Virginia congressman and says, "If it does come to war, at least the Republicans will have the regular army." Without looking up at his colleague, Good takes in a deep breath and lets out a frustrated sigh. Chapter 10. Soldiers ordered to keep the peace. A group of angry protesters, a mixture of white and men of color, have surrounded the Republican headquarters in Tallahassee, Florida. The men carry and wave political signs for both Hayes and Tilden. Soldiers, who are dressed in Confederate uniforms, surround the social unrest. Although these soldiers are under federal control, they have yet to be issued their blue uniform standard for the national government. Since the end of the Civil War and with the country at peace, the funds and supplies have been slowed to a trickle to the South. These soldiers have just been called up again and are struggling with the crowd trying to prevent riots from breaking out. They are there to keep the protesters from crossing the roped-off barriers located a few hundred feet from the entrance of the Republican headquarters. The soldiers have been ordered to do the best they can without harming anyone. So far, there have only been a few minor incidences with protesters fighting amongst themselves and not much work for them. Although their tempers do flare from time to time, the crowd remains relatively calm. Their mood changes every time a horse-drawn carriage filled with politicians carrying political VIP passengers moves into the area. Some of these notable politicians are former Governor Noyes from Ohio, William Chandler, General Ruger, Florida's General Lew Wallace, Florida's Governor Marcellus L. Stearns and W. E. Chandler, from New Hampshire. As the carriage works its way through the crowd, the protesters wave their campaign signs and start shouting obscenities at the political men passing. The carriage driver halts his horses at the barrier line manned by the soldiers when he realizes he can go no further. The driver abruptly decides he is not willing to risk life and limb or his horses to protect the politicians by getting them a few feet closer to the door. Turning in his seat, the driver leans back and says, "Sorry gentlemen, but this is as far as I go." The men inside the carriage are not pleased by his announcement and gaze apprehensively at one another. After a moment of hesitation, they decide there is nothing else they can do and begin, one after the other, step out of the carriage onto the street. Military men rush over to the carriage and assist the politicians by creating a human barrier for them to walk through. While the political men of significance make their way toward the front entrance of Republican headquarters, a few of the disruptors manage to slip through the barriers and race toward them. Much to their dismay, they are quickly halted by the soldiers and herded back behind the roped line. The rowdy crowd continues to rant and rave and shout their obscenities at the politicians. Tempers flare and the protesters, in support of Tilden, shout out in anger, "Tilden or blood." The Republicans supporting Hayes wave their signs and rant, "Recount, recount." Now free of his charges, the carriage driver maneuvers his horses and turns his carriage away from the shouting throng of protesters, departing as quickly as he can to get away from the noise and confusion. As the political men make their way toward the entrance of the headquarters, William Chandler notes the insignia on the uniform of one of the soldiers close to him. Over the noise of the angry crowd, he shouts, "Are you the commanding officer?" You should push these people back further down the road. The officer grunts as he pushes a protester back and then turns back to William Chandler and snipes, "We're doing the best we can, sir," without shooting them. Upon hearing this exchange, Noyes chimes in, "If you must shoot them, damn it, then shoot them." General Ruger barks back, "I gave them strict orders not to do that, Mr. Noyes, unless someone fires upon them first." Noyes now turns to William Chandler. "This is going to cost the party more than the $2,000 you've already paid, Mr. Chandler. I will authorize your elector certificates, legal or not, but the party will pay for this disruption." W. E. Chandler interrupts the conversation and states, "Whatever it takes, Mr. Noyes, whatever it takes." Now Wallace leans over to William and says, "We will need at least another 5,000 to be rendered soon." William Chandler snaps back as they all enter the building, "You'll have your money, Mr. Wallace." Once safely inside the Republican headquarters, the political VIPs observe campaign workers scattered throughout the room shuffling paperwork in preparation for the recount. William Chandler turns to Stearns and promises, "Funds will be on hand to meet every requirement as long as you can guarantee those certificates for Hayes." Turning to face William, Stearns replies, "It has been reported to me that the governor of Georgia is here representing the Democrats in the State Board of Canvassers." William Chandler, seeking more answers, asks, "How many other Democratic statesmen from the North do you know of that have arrived ahead of me to secure the ballot boxes?" "I've heard of several." Then, to assure William that he's got it under control, Stearns adds, "Secretary of State McClin and Comptroller Cogwell, once persuaded, will balance the ballot boxes quite easily for Hayes." Stearns and William Chandler walk toward the campaign office to the right of the room, leaving behind W. E. Chandler and the others who are busy talking with the campaign workers. Once inside, William Chandler watches Stearns as he moves to the chair behind his desk and opens his desk drawer. From this drawer he retrieves a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses and places them on his desk. Starting to pour the whiskey, Stearns says, "So, I've heard you're a whiskey man." With a wink he continues, "This is the best in the South and will make you cry. Give her a try?" Raising an eyebrow, William Chandler nods and takes one of the glasses off the desk. He swirls the amber liquid around the bottom of the glass. Then in one swift motion, shoots the hard liquor down his throat in one gulp. His eyes water and he coughs from the sting and says, "Not bad." He reaches out for another and Stearns fills his glass again. "Most Yankees can't handle Southern whiskey," says Stearns with a slight mischievous smile. Before gulping down the second shot, William Chandler raises his glass in the air, "To President-elect Hayes." Stearns nods in agreement and raises his beverage, "And the Republican Party." Both men then empty their glasses, the second one going down a little easier for William, who adds, "And the best money can bribe, I mean buy." In New York City at Democratic headquarters, Samuel, his nephew Colonel William Pelton, Congressman Abram Hewitt and John Bigelow are busy reviewing and auditing the returns. All of the campaign workers who fill the room assisting them are convinced that Tilden has won by the popular vote and none of them want to hear otherwise. Hewitt turns to Samuel and says, "Floyd in Florida claims he needs $10,000 more." Samuel is not pleased by the request. For what purpose? To guarantee strong and honest men in every precinct. He's offering to put up $1,000 of his own money. Samuel appreciates Floyd's offer but decides to refuse the request. No more money goes out. Then, with a firm tone of dignity in his voice, he adds, "This election must be kept honest." At that point, William Pelton chimes in and complains to his uncle, "It is the Republicans that are not being honest. They are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to influence men to steal this election." John Bigelow adds with a sarcastic tone, "All that and a free federal army, courtesy of President Grant, to help them do it." He pauses for a moment and adds, "They're promising to remove the federal troops along with the carpetbaggers in the reconstructed states if Hayes wins. My concern is the Southern Democrats may turn on us." Samuel starts to get agitated at the direction this conversation is taking. Bristling, he fires back, "I do not care what the Republicans are spending. It is fraud to buy votes. I will not buy my way into the back door of the White House." After a quick moment, he softens his demeanor and calmly adds, "I also believe that Governor Hayes is an honorable man and that he will not allow his party to act improperly either." All the people working in the room witness the outburst. They admire Samuel for his integrity but think it is naive of him to believe the Republicans, regardless of what he may think of Hayes' integrity. Being Democrats, they know from past elections that the Republicans are capable of buying, bribing and stealing whatever they want to win.